Greetings! Welcome to the Devlog for hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades. We're going to start off as always with a quick sound check. Make sure your speakers aren't up too high. Bam. Wonderful. So what have we got for you this week? Well, this is the beginning of a new update cycle. This is update 105. This is going to, we're going to basically have some sort of feature previews for a week or two where I show you some of the new tools and some of the new content that I'm working on, and then we'll move on to the standard sort of experimental, alpha, then final release. So what is this one going to be about? Well, this is update 105 is going to be the sandbox update, and that is going to be centered around a new set of tools, the H3VR Toolbox. Beautiful model here by Stefan. And the toolbox is, almost imagine this like the sandbox UI. I showed off some of the Pistools last devlog, but if you're wondering like, well, how am I going to manage these? Do these have to go into my quick belt slots? That sounds pretty cumbersome, and you'd be right. So the way this is going to work is that this is going to actually spawn out of the wrist menu in scenes that support it, and then we grab the side of it and pull out our non-Euclidean rack of Pistools. So let's take a look at how some of these work together. So we have a, we've got tractor here. Let's get ourselves a destructible target to play with, like so. And let's spawn another one of our wood standees, which will spawn in the air. So we can just use tractor to pull that down here. We can pull it over here and push its distance away. There we go. Is getting blocked by that because of how tall this is. It basically does a cast from like the center point of it. So there we go. Yeah, that is working as expected. We have the cloner here. We can grab things. We can duplicate objects, like I showed before. But the cool thing about cloner is that the first panel that is going to go into this is going to be a panel system, will basically be an object palette that you will use with cloner. So if you've looked at some of these tools and been like, item spawner's full of things, but what if I want to run around the scene placing various things? What you'll be able to do is use cloner to essentially grab objects right out of the spawner or in the world, splat them onto an object palette, much like a color swatch in like Photoshop, and then use that palette to place things all throughout the scene using cloner. We have deletos, which deletes things slowly by default, just so you don't accidentally misclick if you're working in a sort of sensitive scene, but we can also set that to fast and do that whap, nice and fast. Another thing, well, might as well show it with this one, is that these tools by default float in the air. You can put them in your quick belt if you want, but there's almost no need to. You might as well just keep the toolbox because I can just grab the tool back out of its slot in addition to returning it. We have Rotato, which this was glitching on me earlier. Let's see here, if we deselect. Yeah, it's not doing it. One sec. There we go. Had a minor bug with Rotato. Wouldn't be a devlog without a bug. Well, two bugs given that draw order thing. So let's take a look at this. So the way Rotato works is that we have we select an object like so. We have one thumb button which swaps us between local, world, and view rotation axes, which I'll show. So with local, I can grab this little orb here. I can rotate it. If I am outside the circle there, it sort of snaps us to our increments. If I'm inside, I have a bunch of really fine adjustment if I want to get it exactly how I want. I can swap the angles like so I could just lean into the side like that if I wanted that for some reason. We have world axes, which of course rotate relative to the world. So if you've got a weird orientation of something like that and say just want to spin it on world Y, you can do so. And then we've got view axes. So if you want to rotate something, that's not right. Well, let's imagine that worked. Let's reset it. There we go. Here we go. Now it's rotating based on view axes. I don't know why that did that. Yep. Clearly, some math is broken. There's our third try is a charm. We've got our third bug. Quaternions are hard, kids. Just ask a game developer and you'll make them drink. So yeah, so those are our different rotation functions, and we just go like that to deselect. And then lastly, we have locker. As you saw before, the way this object works, right, is that I can pick this up and put it anywhere in the air, and it just stops. The toolbox is the same. We have a dedicated tool here called locker that allows us to toggle the lock state of two different ways of locking an object. There is what's called kinematic locking, which if I unlock this kinematically, it goes like that. So if I grab, it falls like such. But if I set this, if I set this to lock and move this up, it stays there. There's a second type of locking that you may want to do once I get in things like tables, which is you might want to make something pickup lockable, which is our leftmost symbol here. I can change this to pickup locked. You can see there, lock, etc. I now cannot grab this. I can click my trigger over this. I'm unable to grab this, which once I get, say, tables in, or shelves, or things like that, or racks, you might want to place something that you want to place objects on in the scene, and then not be able to accidentally like pull grab it, or actually just grab it with your hands. So that is what the purpose of locker is. Wonderful. We can, use rotato here. Wonderful. Move that over there. Wonderful. So there you have it. That is all of our core tools that have been implemented so far in action. I am loving them. So what else have we got? So I have been going back and sort of in the same way that I made the destruction effects on our little hot dog standee here better and more enjoyable. I've been doing something similar to a bunch of the crates that you had seen before and were in the bot spawner over there, but also for some even more complex ones. Now, I'm going to give a disclaimer here. These are not the most performance efficient things on the planet. This was very much I wanted to make a box that was as satisfying as possible, not necessarily the cheapest destructible box. So these are not the sort of thing that I'm going to be putting like 30 of in a scene because folks with like weaker CPUs are going to run into stutters with them. These are very much destruction toys, but I wanted to sort of like push the complexity of them and have fun with that. So and played around with them. So we've got the small one here, which breaks apart like you saw before, but the individual pieces can now be broken apart as well. They sometimes pass through some of their damage. And then this one's way more complex. This goes from a sort of fully intact state to a damaged state to 6 individual sides, which can be further broken apart. The color is not quite right on that particle. I need to fix it. Satisfying. Same thing with our big one here. Helps if you actually hit it. Oh, just look at that. That is so much fun. That is so much fun to break apart. The expense comes from the fact that the collision is fairly accurate on it, and these are fairly complex components. I tried to do it within reason. There are a whole bunch of very simple convex mesh colliders for the various sub pieces, but even so, there's no way to make this not fairly expensive. Oh, satisfying. Let's reload our scene and shoot it with a shotgun. USAS. Perfect. Just blast through the center of it here. Oh, so perfect. wonderful. Just wonderful. I'll see if there's still a little bit of tuning I can do, and probably do a little bit of a review of some of the components and actually go like, does a collision actually have to be that detailed? But yeah, they are super fun. I love destruction. So, and the then sort of like lastly on the show component of things is like, you probably recognize a bunch of these props from the Arizona scene and the original Breaching Sim. This was a pack of like destructible assets I bought very early on in terms of H3's sort of development, in part because like fracturing assets by hand is terrible work, and so this was nice. But these definitely have shown their age in a bunch of ways. The collision isn't very great. The sounds are just not good. So these are the ones of these that I'm going to keep are going to get an aesthetic and destruction and sound tune-up. As I said before, this is going to be the sandbox update, so I'm going to be going into as many sandbox scenes as I can and giving them a sort of a pass for love, making sure that they're AI compatible, and basically enabling the save load scene system for them. So it's going to be super fun. Anywho, let's jump out of VR and yeah, just talk a little bit more about what that update's going to be like. Yo! So yeah, so what is the update 105 alpha cycle going to look like? As I said before, my sort of focus here is like, there's some system focus, which is in sort of building these new tools and making sure that they interface with the categories of objects in the game correctly. But one of the big, like more so than some of the past updates, the big one here is going to be about rebuilding content as such. Like, I've got a lot of pieces of content, both that you haven't seen and stuff that has been in the game for a long time, that is at various sort of stages of doneness. Some of it just needs basically some metadata cleanup. Some of it needs just sort of like a Unity scene graph rebuild. Like, I've got the bottles. I have meshes. I have chunks of meshes. I have glass shatter sounds. I don't really have some good... I need to build some particle effects that actually match those objects and sort of line them up and make them look good. But it's largely about the it's like taking a Lego creation apart and putting it back together. And then there's a few pieces of content that are, I just have meshes, so they need their sort of like full sort of production. But the goal here is like, what is, when update 105 is done, what I would ideally like to have is that the sort of core sandbox scenes of the game that everyone uses the most, which are like the Proving Ground, actually the Proving Ground's a special case, but the our friendly 45 range, the Arizona range, maybe the old Breaching scene, seeing as it has some of these in. I don't know. I said I wasn't going to touch that scene, but I kind of would like to. It's still playable enough with. So that's solid maybe on the old Breaching scene. But basically just going in, pulling old versions of props out, putting in sort of new ones that are all like getting those all into the item spawner. It's not just like rebuild the glass bottle, but actually put it in the correct category. There's going to be a bunch of new subcategories in the item spawner for props and barriers and different subcategories. You might have even seen it on the item spawner during this video. Like there's not just like a targets subcategory that already has pages and pages of things, but that's going to be separated into like steel, destructible. There's still a generic category for stuff that there's not enough of, or it's sort of miscellaneous, and stuff might even be change categories later on. If I end up if something ends up being like expanded into a bunch of variants. We'll see. But yeah, in a big way, working on this part of the game is about sort of deciding like what is the categorization of all the objects that aren't weapons that are going to be present here, and sort of how robust are those sets going to be. But the goal here is to get that all in place, and sort of bring as much of the sort of freeform part of the game up to a done state of just like, this is the scene now. This scene is not going to change from here on in, which means you are going to be safe to actually save configurations of it, save scenarios in it, and share those with your friends if you want. One of the sort of content packs, which I'll show off later in this alpha cycle, I got some of it done, is some stuff that's really oriented towards the sport shooting community. I've got a bunch of sort of like IPSC style regulation barriers. There's going to be some more target variants. Some nice blue barrels for barriers and tables and things. I'm probably going to put in some form of shot clock and some sort of like scoring displays and things. So if you want to set up a very sort of realist sort of like shooting course, you'll be able to do so, but you'll also be able to mix in a bunch of the zanier things into that, because it's all going to be using shared systems. Oh, that reminds me, that's the other thing that I want to get into update 105. It won't be done, it won't be the full expression of it, but I want to get the architecture in for what is going to be called the event channel system. And the way this is going to work in H3, this is how objects are going to communicate with each other. So a bunch of folks asked, like, man, it'd be really nice to have just a reset button for the steel targets that knock over instead of having to actually go over and click that button. That's going to be a simple thing that is going to work on the event channel system. There'll be some way to, and I still haven't figured out the exact way I want to handle this, you'll be able to assign the function of reset to a channel, which is going to be a number between probably either 1 and 99 or 1 and 999. And every time an event fires on that channel, reset will fire on all of those targets. So you'll be able to, and there'll be just be a handheld button that you'll be able to just like set what channel it's set to and just like click the trigger and it will fire an event on that channel. So you'll be able to use that for all sorts of stuff, whether it's resetting steel targets or having a bunch of things explode or turning the thing flinger on or off. Those will all be things that you will be able to do with event channel remotes, and will basically be the sort of like the architecture that all object to object turning SOSIG spawners on and off eventually, possibly having other, so having cinematic explosions occur when certain things happen. So it's as I said, it's to slowly build towards some of my prior visions of sort of like scenario creation from when I've talked about Game Planner before, and I think it was called like the UGS before that many years ago. But the most important thing for me is to keep all of these systems as object focused as possible, as toy like as possible. It should be. I don't want to just make dry dev tools out of these things. If like there are dev tools that exist, it's called the Unity editor. And so I want to take all of the things, like anything that can be made far more kinetic and fun and light and breezy to play with, and focus on making that experience fun and keeping those really fast to use for everyone who doesn't want to sit down for several hours and be like, all right, I'm going to make a whole long, super involved interactive thing. It's just like the Pistools. This should all be something that just like you pull it out, you do a thing, everything's set, and I'm done, and I'm playing. As much as I can have under that umbrella, the better, as far as I see it. So yeah. So that is the plan. I don't know when the next build is going to be. I'm probably going to do at least another week of like feature previews before I even put something on experimental, because I'm doing some not really big code changes that affect anything. Like none of the nice thing about this is I don't think anything that I am doing for this alpha cycle should affect anything related to mods. So I don't think the modders will have to update anything at all. This is all just going to be sort of like new system stuff that is on its own island, and sort of metadata changes that won't change old content. So everything should be much, much smoother than it's been with the last two alpha cycles, which has me excited. But yeah. So anywho, I'll have more cool content and system preview stuff to show you folks next week, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Peace.